Hi, hello, and welcome to the HII Method. My name is Jen Hatz. I am the host of the HII Method podcast, and I'm also the founder of the HII Method, a holistic, integrative, and innovative approach to assessing and optimizing human health, well-being, and performance. And I am partnered with Neuroforce One, a human performance company that has been training and churning out champions for years with assessments and training in their facility as well as remote options. And welcome back to the HII Method podcast. I don't know about you all, but I needed to take a little break there, a little breather after that last episode because I was getting fired up talking about a lot of the darker side of things. Some of the things that are left unsaid that can end up placing individuals at risk or at harm because these things are left unsaid. And it gets me real fired up. I'll say that it's something that is I've naturally found myself in situations really from as long as I can remember, really even like starting in my teens. I was very much drawn to these situations where I feel a need to be outspoken about something that feels like something is wrong, something's occurring that needs to be addressed and identified, and I tend to take it on as my own little thing of like, I got to talk about this. So just a little heads up, we're going to talk even more in depth about this exact topic because it needs to be talked about. It's so important that we talk about it because only then when we bring up these things that are otherwise kept in the dark, when we bring them up to the light, that is when it can become a jumping off point for change. That is when once we acknowledge and address and become aware of what is going on, then we know what to do, or at least we know how to best act, how to best shift our direction of focus, how to best redirect any of our attention and effort. You know, it's like that awareness is step one. So that means we bring it out of the dark and bring it up to the light. So bringing things up to light today. What I want to do, first of all, I want to we're going to review a little bit of from a physiology standpoint about what it is that is occurring in your body when we talk about really this whole big topic about your blood. So hopefully you're cool with talking about blood and the cardiovascular system and the circulatory system and how all of this works, how nothing in the human body is completely separate and compartmentalized and its own thing. Everything about your body, about you as a human being, about how you exist in the world is this completely intricate, holistic thing, meaning all parts make up the whole. Nothing is separate and individual and compartmentalized. So that means that if you study, let's say, something about a system in the body, you have to constantly take into account the fact that that system in the body, like if we're talking about cardiovascular system, it doesn't exist on its own in this separate silo, separate from the other parts of the body. It's all constantly and continually collaborating, coexisting, working together. Sometimes there's a little bit of conflict, but this is how it works. So we have to approach everything, every topic, especially when we're talking about physiology or just what to do about your body and your physiology. We have to always look at it through so many different lenses to see that there's so many other things that are going on. It's not just the one thing that we want to direct our focus on. There's always other areas that we need to also pay attention to. Now, when we come to the topic of talking about cardiovascular system, talking about your circulatory system, talking about the use of an IV fluid, when it would be appropriate and when it's not appropriate. So going back to just about how you have a set volume of blood that is circulating at all times, it's always tightly regulated. That is the absolute, like from a survival standpoint, your ability to function is directly in danger if your blood volume drops or raises above that normal range. It wants to sit at that nice, happy, normal range because you have a closed system for this fluid to be circulating in. So if you can imagine if you had pipes in your house and there was all of a sudden more fluid added to those pipes before they were able to accommodate the fluid that they already had, that's a problem. Right? You would think like probably burst pipe or something. So it's like, if you want to think of it in the most like literal logical sense, it's like that. It's like a closed system that has a set amount of volume of fluid circulating, and it's circulating because of your cardiovascular system and for your cardiovascular system. So your heart and your lungs are doing a whole lot of work to make sure that the blood that is circulating throughout your system, that it's not only the right volume and concentration, but that it's doing what it has to do. It has to bring oxygen and nutrients out to your body, and it has to remove all of the metabolic waste products that build up outside, in your body peripherally. You can build up a whole lot of toxic, cellular metabolic byproducts. I know it doesn't sound pretty to think that like, oh, I'm building up all this waste inside of me, but you have to be able to remove that from the cells also. So the blood is doing that combination of bringing out that nice, fresh, oxygenated blood with all the nutrients out to your cells, and is removing the metabolic waste product and bring it back up to the heart, back through your lungs so you can exhale it. So your entire system is it's complex, right? So you have not only these vessels that are moving this blood, but you have your heart that is pumping all this blood through your body, and it's very essential, absolutely essential that it is operating the way it needs to, that your blood is the appropriate concentration of volume that it needs to be, and that your lungs are working appropriately. Like, this entire system does a phenomenal job of keeping you alive, as long as we're identifying it as doing such. Like, it is keeping you alive, quite literally. So what would be probably a maladaptive behavior then overall, something that you wouldn't necessarily want to be pushing or providing an added stress to that system, is this entire topic really of adding in that fluid from an IV fluid, bag separate from your body, and just adding it directly into circulation if you don't actually need it. You're actually placing a greater risk and a greater stress, and increasing the pressure of the system, increasing the volume of blood, first of all, and that's increasing the pressure. But you're adding this unnecessary stressor on the heart by doing this, by adding fluid to the system that already knows what to do and how to do it. Now, even greater risks come from using the IV fluids when you're not identifying your actual need for them. You're not identifying that you have, in fact, low blood volume, or that you have an electrolyte imbalance, or that there's some clinical need for it. So if you're not assessing for it, then you don't want to blindly use it, right? Also, using the IV means that you would need to be accommodating it at a very slow pace, at a slow rate, so that way you can monitor appropriately that you are, in fact, accommodating those fluids appropriately, that it's not shocking your system. There is something called, I want to say it's called speed shock. Yeah, the speed shock is what can happen from a very rapid infusion of those IV fluids, where it basically is what it sounds like. It's like you've shocked your system because of the speed of adding this fluid outside of you directly into your system. This is a major cardiovascular risk, as well as a risk for something with your brain, like coma, swelling, death. These are quite literally like the risks that are present, even if you are just in a hospital setting. If you're in a regular hospital bed, under monitoring, you're still at risk for this speed shock from having fluids rapidly administered. You're also at risk, at a cardiovascular risk, at a risk for your brain, for your overall, we're talking about cardiovascular, talking about heart attack, stroke, and death, that you are at a risk when you're also adding these fluids under the added stress of just physiological stress. So you're not at rest in a bed accommodating fluids slowly, but rather you are under physiological stress, under a high stress situation, and you're adding these fluids very rapidly. This all poses the greatest risk that you could possibly impose when it comes to IV fluid administration. This is what the reality is that we're talking about today, and why we're talking about it today. So I'm going to get to that in a second. But so going back to that set volume of fluid, so your body's tightly regulating the set volume of fluid. Now, most of us have already that normal blood volume. For the most part, if you're walking around happy, healthy, living, breathing, doing your thing, you more than likely have normal blood volume. You would absolutely know. There would be very clear signs and symptoms if your blood volume was low or if it was high. So for the most part, we walk around at a normal blood volume. That is like you can pretty much hang your hat on that one. Yeah, probably normal blood volume right now, especially for an athlete that is preparing to play. Chances are, unless you have been severely sick, let's say you had the flu and you were just, nothing you took in was staying in, everything was coming out, and you were severely dehydrated. That would be the only situation that I would say that an individual might have low blood volume. But in that case, I would say that individual should not be preparing to play a game either, right? But otherwise, athletes that are preparing to play a game more than likely have that normal blood volume, because again, that is what we tend to be at always. You will know there will be very strong signs and symptoms if your blood volume is not normal. But assuming that your blood volume is normal and that you're preparing to play a game, and now you start adding in these fluids under this false sense of safety and this false impression that you are optimizing your hydration, that you're helping to pre-hydrate or prevent dehydration or prevent cramping. The reality is you're adding fluid to this closed system, and you are under physiological stress. If you're preparing for a game, you already have a little bit of a heightened sympathetic hormonal response. You're already feeling that adrenaline pumping at least a little bit, right? As you start warming up though, as you start actually moving your body, this is where exercise physiology comes into play. So now it's no longer just the clinical nutrition as if you were in a hospital bed. This is quite literally the real life application of being on the field and applying exercise physiology to the equation. When you start moving, you have what is called blood shunting. This is a natural occurrence in the body. As you start moving, the blood that is normally present within your digestive system and your kidneys starts to move away from those organs and move towards your muscles, because that's what is needed during that activity. You need to have that full muscular health, we'll say that, the ability to bring that fresh, healthy, oxygenated blood to your muscles, and then to remove that metabolic waste product. You need to have that blood there where they're being used, in this case in your muscles. So as you start moving, you have that blood shunting away from your digestive system. You don't need to be digesting food when you're moving, you need to move. And the same thing with your kidneys. So the blood that's in your kidneys moves away from your kidneys and it goes out peripherally towards your muscles. That means your kidneys have a lower ability to accommodate their normal functioning. So you just inhibited your normal kidney function. And as I know it sounds bad, it's not bad. It just means that you're not going to urinate. You're not going to filter and remove things from your blood out through your urine the way that you normally would when you were at rest. So you've diminished a bit that kidney functioning. It's not in a bad way. It's because you need everything in your system to keep you up and moving. This is more of a survival instinct than anything else, that your body needs to move because there might be a predator around you, right? So you don't need to digest and you don't need to pee right now. You need to move. But what that means then is that anything that is in your system, anything that is in your blood, including the volume of fluid in your blood, including the concentration of electrolytes in your blood, you have that much less of an ability to appropriately remove anything that is excessive in your system. So it's staying in this closed system. So if you have this added fluid and added electrolytes, depending on what the concentration is, you just added it to your system and then started moving, and you basically shut off your ability to remove anything that could be a danger. You're placing that added risk, that added stress on your heart. You already, when you're working out, you already are going to have an added stress on your heart just to work out. Even if you're in shape, I know that probably sounds like, well, I'm in shape, so I don't get stressed when I work out. It feels, I'm whatever. No. This is a normal thing. This is what we talk about, like when you're exercising. That is in fact a stress on your heart. It's a good stress, but it's a stress on the heart. It's causing the heart to do more work than it would at rest. So just think about it like that. This stress is not good, or it's not a bad thing for sure, but it's a good stress if you're appropriately working out and you're not like overdoing it or anything. It's a good stress, but it is a stress on the heart. So you're placing that added stress on the heart when you are moving, especially in a game. You are moving at your maximum effort. That is high intensity, maximum effort exercise. So that's not just a little bit of a stress on your heart because you're doing a easy breezy little workout today, no big deal. That's like full, I'm going to run into a brick wall, like maximum effort stress on the heart with this added fluid in your system and this reduced ability to remove that excess from your system to remove that stress on the heart from the fluid itself. This is one big, massive, like, pile of events coming together to place the most, the most, I can't even express it, the most like magnificent, if you will, the most magnifying, the most, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like the largest stress that you could place on the heart is occurring right during those circumstances, right? This is not a matter of coincidental timing. This is quite literally a massive intersection of risks all happening at once, because you have added something to your system that you cannot remove, and you've added this maximum intensity, maximum effort stress on top of all of it. So there's nowhere for that blood to go. You don't have storage like for fluid in your system. We're not like camels. We can't just store fluid or move fluid to a different space and save it for later. That fluid is in your heart, period. It's in your heart. It's being pumped through your system back to your heart. It's in your lungs to be able to inhale and exhale to oxygenate that fluid. Your heart and lungs, and eventually your brain as well. So this is the entire system that is being stressed, is quite literally because you have nowhere to put this excess fluid, and you just removed your ability to accommodate or remove excess fluid from your system. Now, so not only does that sound kind of scary that this is like a major cardiovascular risk to be doing this under these circumstances, to take in this fluid right before exercise or even during exercise. This is a major risk factor. In this case, it could be from the speed shock of the taking in fluids that are very rapid, or it could be from a fluid overload where the heart and lungs have far too much blood in the system to work with, and they don't have the ability to remove it through the kidneys. Normally, like I said, normally your kidneys will be able to remove that excess fluid, but in this case they don't, because you've added that element of exercise. You've added the exercise physiology element, in this case, that blood shunting away from kidneys. Now, why this is a problem though? So I talked about how something that I saw that was very alarming, that, well, at first, what I saw was the fact that there was a practice that was very normalized, very widely accepted as being part of like a pregame ritual, if you will. It's not necessarily doing anything to prepare an individual really in any way, and it's deemed as being just a safe thing, right? It's deemed as being just this totally safe, like there's no risk, whatever. If they want it, it's fine. They're just going to pee it out anyway. So here's the problem though. Taking that perspective that it's safe because, well, they're just going to pee it out anyway. What you're acknowledging by acknowledging that is the fact that you've added something to their circulatory system that is placing a stress on their heart. And so their kidneys are responding by removing that excess fluid through urine. So if you're acknowledging the fact that, well, they're just going to pee it out anyway, so no harm, no foul, you're shadowing over the fact that they're peeing it out because it's stressing the heart. And any medical professionals, any medical practitioners, anyone who has studied any type of clinical area really should be well aware of this mechanism of how your kidneys are helping to remove, they're filtering your blood and removing what is not needed from your blood. And even when it comes to, in this case, something that is stressing the heart because of a volume perspective, the volume of blood that is stressing the heart, medical practitioners are well aware that someone who has hypertension, who has high blood pressure chronically, they very often are prescribed a diuretic. And it's to have that exact action, to remove excess fluid from circulation, to take pressure off the heart and lower their blood pressure. And in this case, that excess fluid is being pushed out through their urine. So that diuretic effect that you're getting for a hypertension. So someone who has high blood pressure, they're already experiencing this series of events, and medical practitioners really should be well aware of that and should be acknowledging that as like, okay, that is in fact the thing that is happening. When I'm seeing the IV fluids and, well, they're going to pee it out anyway. That's what's happening. Here's the added problem though, is the fact that a lot of those athletes, in this case athletes that we're talking about here, if they're taking an IV fluids before a game, they're about to start working out. They're about to start exercising. They're about to start placing that added stress on their system and also removing their ability for their kidneys to function, for their kidneys to pull out that excess fluid. That combination is so critically overlooked. And this right there is why I felt the need to strongly address this entire issue, because what I saw was not only that athletes were receiving IV fluid because they wanted it, because they had this belief that it was going to help as their preparatory for game day. What I actually saw then, and this was something that I was working with, especially a specific program that had this issue with cramping, and they were treating cramping with IVs. And I said, let's redirect our efforts towards hydration. It's going to take some time, but we need to redirect our efforts and remove the belief about IVs. We need to really shift how we view this and what we do about it. And we started working and really like clearing out all the cramping issues. Like that was really not at all of the issue. From camp on, the cramping was very much under control. It was still this lingering belief about the IVs being this, if anything, the psychological dependence or the ritual of it was taking over. And what I saw then, so after having, a couple months where we were making some really massive positive changes, and especially like camp, the team doctor actually came up and shook my hand. He's like, that's the fewest IVs I've ever given during a camp. I'm like, that's great. That means we're making progress and change in the right direction. This is exactly what we want to be doing. We want to move away from IV fluid dependency and the belief of its safety. And we want to move towards hydration tactics and actually treating the cramping and preventing cramping in the way that it's intended, right? Now, 1 week later, so this is after camp ended, 1 week later on the first game of the season, the absolute first play of the game. And this was a night game. So this is like an 8 p.m. kickoff. This is a night game, probably the last weekend of August. So it's hot as can be out there. And first play of the game, an athlete that was on the field for that first kickoff comes over to the sidelines and says, I don't feel right. I think I need an IV. So I immediately start asking questions. I'm like, what doesn't feel right? Do you just need more of a warm up? Like the game just started. Let's do something. And immediately the team doc comes over and the athlete says the exact same thing to the team doc. He says, I don't feel right. I think I need an IV. And the team doc says, okay, let's go. And so rushes him off to the locker room. They come back 20 minutes later and the athlete is shivering and has blue lips. So this is evidence that the athlete received a rapid infusion IV because the IV bags are kept refrigerated. So imagine having like cold fluids all of a sudden rapidly infused into you. And it was maybe a couple of minutes, maybe at most 5 minutes before the athlete was back on the field again. At this point, I everything in me was screaming like, no, this is not happening on my watch. We need to do something about this immediately. We need to address this immediately because this is no longer the safe, harmless placebo effect kind of a thing. This is a massive risk. So I sat down with that athlete the next day. It might have been the day after. I can't remember if it was a Saturday night game that we had Sunday off, but I sat with that athlete as soon as I saw him the next time I saw him. And I just asked him, I'm like, hey, has anyone explained to you what an IV is used for? Or like what cramping is like, what's causing the cramping and how to do it and how to treat it, what the IV is used for and what the risks are involved. Has anyone explained any of this to you? And the entire conversation, he was almost in shock when we were talking about this because he had no idea. And when I expressed to him, I'm like, you need to understand that there are a lot of risks here that you're not aware of, that maybe no one told you about, but this is really scary stuff that we're messing with, and the risks can be as bad as heart attack, stroke, and death. Like, we are not messing with this at all. We are not doing this at all. We are going to take a completely different approach. We're going to optimize your hydration throughout the entire week so that you don't feel like you need to make up for it in this short window of time before a game. And he was immediately on board. He's like, yes, like I do not want anything to do with any of those risks. Let's work together. Let's figure this out. So I basically took that athlete like under my wing, is like, I'm watching out for this one, because this to me is like, I cannot stress enough how scary it is to see someone experiencing something that they have no idea. No one has any idea the risks involved. And it's like, we need to intervene immediately. So taking that athlete under my care really for the entire season, that season, and then the entire next season. And the progress that he made was phenomenal. All the cramping issues that he was having was under control. And I was so proud immediately because he was absolutely following everything that he needed to when it came to preparing his hydration and really just taking care of himself all throughout the week, every single week. And it was phenomenal. I was so excited to see just how well he was making those changes and that positive progress, like almost immediately. Now I say almost immediately because it was still a psychological dependence, a feeling of that ritual, that pregame ritual, that feeling, right? And sometimes psychologically, the feeling itself, if you think of a placebo effect. So I just want to cast this image in your mind. So a placebo effect means that what you see with the placebo effect is that your thoughts and what you believe about something can increase or change your physiological feelings and response, if we want to call it like that. So your physiology can actually change in response to your thoughts. I know that sounds amazing and beautiful and super like it's an area that I am so dead set on studying specifically because it's absolutely incredible. But it can work not only in a positive direction where you can get the positive changes in your physiology in response to your thoughts, it can also have the opposite effect. And you can start to experience more of a physiological disconnect or dysfunction because your thoughts are telling you so, if that makes sense. So in this case, when there's a ritual, when there's a psychological dependence, when there is something that you feel so strongly, emotionally, mentally attached to as helping to complete your game day routine, for this situation, it's that much harder to break out of that routine and that behavior. So you have to allow yourself a lot of patience, a lot of grace, and allow yourself that non-judgment, right? Like to not cast judgment on yourself for maybe having some feelings like you need to still have this thing because you're still working through the attachment to it. You're still learning how to believe in the new behaviors that you're taking on and learning how to really feel empowered with the changes that you are making. So there is that period of time where, at least, so for perfect example, for this case, where the athlete was still for a couple weeks, even though we were making changes throughout the week to best accommodate and best shift the direction and best really empower him in how he's taking care of his body, there was still just a little bit of that dependency for the pregame ritual, if you will. But it was only a couple of weeks because then it was finally like the belief in himself, the empowerment in himself finally built up to the point where he was no longer needing it. And that was probably the biggest positive change that I could have ever witnessed, because that means that it worked. That means that the approach of working with not just the human body, but working with the human being, that it worked because this individual was able to shift this long-standing behavior that they were attached to in a way that actually served them a benefit. So he actually played very well for the remainder of that season, the following next season, and then he went on to the next stage, the league. So I was very proud of the progress that happened because of that situation, that event. Now, the reason why this specific story stays very, very close to me is not only because of that positive change that we saw, but this athlete also, fortunately and unfortunately, I'll say fortunately first because it brings to light something that is very much still needed to be addressed. Unfortunately, it's difficult to ever witness and or experience something that is so truly traumatic that there's not a single person, there's no one that can ever truly relate to that type of experience. And this athlete happened to experience a very traumatic event, quite frankly, on live TV in front of an audience. And it was a cardiovascular event. This athlete, everything I don't want to cry because I want to make sure that this message gets out. I felt so strongly that I know for a fact that this athlete, that this was not a just happenstance. This was not circumstance. This was not just coincidental timing. This was nothing that is inexplainable, elusive. We don't know what it is. It could just be this completely unforeseen timing coincidence thing. There's very clearly something here that is not being addressed the way it needs to be addressed. It's the dark stuff. It's the dark side of things that are not being talked about. They're not being brought up to light. Whatever that means for the situation, all I can say is that there are clear patterns. Nothing is ever happening just spontaneously. Nothing ever just happens just out of the blue, coincidence, timing. Everything that ever happens, especially with our bodies, there's a chain of events that leads up to it. There's always connections. There's always connecting events, connecting circumstances. There's always a trend that we can forecast of, hey, if we see this happening, we can forecast this in the future. There's never, ever going to be this completely spontaneous, unique, coincidental timing of things. There's always a interworking of events over time that leads to an actual event. And in this case, it was the fact that something that I was so diligent about preventing ever happening in these athletes happened in 2019. And I predicted something like this as being the absolute end all, highest risk possibility, and that we need to nip this in the bud now. And all of that, I feel so strongly, has in some way impacted that individual athlete to where this was, if anything, the aftermath of what his history was, because he very much does have history related to something that is a cardiovascular event under these circumstances. He has a history that could lead up to this. It's right there in his medical history. So whether or not this was something that was an acute effect of something that was going on during that time, or if it was the effect of the chronic changes, chronic adaptations maybe in his body because of that repeated history, that repeated pattern of behavior over his history that was absolutely pushing him towards this event. It's so difficult. It's so difficult for anyone to identify something in real time as being a potential real life risk, a potential real life threat. And it's even more difficult to have those conversations, to have those difficult conversations when they need to happen. It's even more difficult from that to make the changes. And then on top of that, we still have work to do. On top of all of that, there's still very clearly something that is missing here. There's still very clearly a need to bring this to light, because I can promise that everything that was occurring just within that program, with the overall attitudes about, and really just beliefs about something that is otherwise safe, and therefore no need to talk about it, no need to question anything that is being said, no need to question what a practitioner is providing you, no need to question what a coach is recommending for you. There's no need to question anything. No, we do need to question everything. And the athlete themselves, the individual, needs to have that sense of empowerment, that sense of belief in what they know is right for them, and the ability to speak on it, the ability to speak up and speak on it and speak for themselves and say, you know what, I don't agree with that. For me, I think I want to go somewhere else. I think I want to do something else. I think I want to choose a different route. I think whatever it is that is needed to be brought into question, we need to do that. We need to practice that curiosity, practice that questioning, allow the ability without judgment to maybe reject someone's recommendations, or maybe to just question them, to just bring up conversation, and for there to be a trust, a true authentic relationship, a true authentic communication between a practitioner and a patient, or between a coach and an athlete, between a trainer, a dietitian, and the individual they're working with. There needs to be that cohesive, true communication, constantly applying curiosity and constantly adjusting to what is actually relevant and actually necessary, and not allowing or enabling for any type of a behavior pattern that may pose a risk, or for there to be something that is happening. Let's say in this case, so there was the fear of cramping. Well, if the cramping is still continuing despite this intervention, then we know that the intervention is not doing what it needs to be doing. So we can remove that, right? Even if we believe it's a safe placebo effect, the fact is he's not getting the outcome of treating cramping by this supposed safe placebo effect. So therefore it's not a placebo at all, right? A placebo would give us the intended outcome. In this case, it's not. It's not doing anything for us. We can remove it from the equation. I think practitioners in general need to get comfortable with saying no to individuals that are asking for things, but doing so from a place of love, from a place of non-judgment, because you, the practitioner, there is not a chance in the world that you would ever want to do harm to an individual. But by not saying what needs to be said, by not having that uncomfortable conversation, and by not approaching it from a health equity standpoint, if someone doesn't truly understand what it is that they're asking for, you have every sense of responsibility on your shoulders to make sure that the decisions they are making are not placing them at a greater risk or greater harm, and that you're not enabling it or allowing it. There's so many layers. There are so many layers. I don't want to get into it again because I know I'm gonna just go off on this. There are so many layers though behind this entire situation. But I think the most important takeaway out of all of this that I want to stress, and I will stress this to the end of time. I cannot tell you how adamant I am to get this message out there, that there is never, and there never will be, an experience in your body, in your life, that is just completely by chance, completely random, completely coincidental. There's always a rhyme and a reason to everything. There's always a series of events, a series of behaviors, a pattern of different connecting dots that lead up to something. It's just not until something happens that we look backwards and we start to connect the dots. I think the best way that we can start to improve on this is to really pay attention to what we're doing in the moment, and not waiting until something happens to then look backwards and do a proper assessment of things. I think that's helped us to identify and investigate when something does happen. That's not going to help us prevent things from happening. We have to be that much more proactive and stay truly rooted in the present moment, identifying the fact that there are always multiple factors at play, and that maybe what we're doing right now is not the correct or the best way to go about things, and to be okay with questioning that, to allow ourselves without judgment to make new decisions, to make new changes, to maybe say no to something, to set that boundary or reject that request, or maybe on the flip side, to accept a new perspective, a new opinion on a matter, regardless of who the individual is or what their background is, because maybe they are seeing something that you never saw before. Maybe someone else's perspective, regardless of who they are, is actually exactly what you needed. That's my big takeaway after all this, is that really we need to start opening our eyes to new perspectives, opening our hearts to, making choices without judgment, allowing ourselves to embrace the uncomfortable conversations that we might need to have in order to propose and promote positive changes in the directions that we intend to have. This is all hopefully bringing up, I know it's a lot of dark stuff that I'm bringing up to light. And so I don't want to end on a dark note. I'd rather end on a light note on this entire saga here. But I truly believe that there are far more creative, intelligent minds out there that have absolutely every positive potential, everything that you feel and see and experience is valid. And I think when everyone can feel that much more safe to express what they're seeing and what they're experiencing, I think we all collectively can improve. And I just hope that there is a greater push towards allowing people to speak up, even if it's in a team meeting, if it's in whatever type of a forum. Allow everyone to speak up without judgment. Allow the actual opinions and perspectives of others to actually be taken into account. And for all of us to choose that we don't want to continue a cycle that isn't serving us, that we'd rather have that uncomfortable period of change and have those conversations and be open to those perspectives in order to have that change that we want, that positive change in the right direction. So thank you for listening to this episode of the HII Method podcast. I'll be talking to you guys again soon. Bye.